Welcome to The Wonder of Star Wars The Old Republic, a new series by Swtorista focusing on playing the game for the first time. Well, not quite. If you've never been to my channel before, I create videos for Star Wars The Old Republic about all different parts of the game, whether it's PvP, crafting, or just how to find cool armor. I've been playing the game for a really long time, since before it came out 5 years ago in fact. But since I've been focusing on all different types of things on this channel, I've kind of stopped playing the game, and I've kind of lost the wonder of SWTOR. In this series, I'm going to be creating a brand new account, a free-to-play account in fact, and I'll be playing the game from level 1 from scratch. And I'll be focusing on the story, the lore, the world, and the wonder of Star Wars The Old Republic. It's an amazing game, and I have so many good memories of playing the game when it first came out that I want to try and recapture. I know it's impossible to completely capture those feelings of amazement at playing the game for the first time, because most of them came from the surprise of seeing what's new around the corner. But I'm certainly damn well gonna try. I hope you guys enjoy coming along on this journey with me. And I know Let's Plays and gameplay videos usually start at level 1 on the character creation screen, but I think we're going to start with something a little different. A while ago, I announced I was going to do this series, and I started gathering feedback from you guys. Often when players create characters in Star Wars The Old Republic, they create their own lore, background, and history for their character that isn't included in the main part of their game. Some people do it for roleplay, as part of their character biography, and some people just do it as part of their own story when they're playing by themselves to think about when they're making choices in the game. This is an extremely story-heavy game, but it doesn't mean you can't make your own story outside of it. I'm going to be playing the Inquisitor story. The Inquisitor is an Imperial Sith, but unlike the Sith warrior, they're kind of forced into becoming a Sith. They were a slave to start with. We don't quite know what type of slave they were, and it's not really important to the game. Just that they didn't come from noble birth or anything like that. In fact, as I play, you may hear the words slave, slave, slave said about 40 million times. So I decided to ask my channel, what kind of slave might I be? What my history might be? Where did I come from? I'm going to be playing as a Cathar, a cat-like species that was actually created for the Knights of the Old Republic game, the precursor to Star Wars The Old Republic. It's a very special race, very connected to the lore of this game. The Cathar, or Cathar, depending on how you want to say it, come from a planet of the same name that was pretty much decimated in the Mandolorian Wars. A few Cathar escaped, but not that many, and the planet itself is pretty genocided up. Like I said, this video is going to be a little different than the rest of this series. That'll be actual gameplay. But this time around, we're going to be talking about the roleplay background and history of my character that we're making up right now. Alpha commented, "Have you ever watched the Clone Wars? There was an episode or two called Slaves of the Republic that was super interesting, on a planet called Zagiria. If you're planning on playing a male, maybe a former slave from that planet who fought in the gladiator pits, or something like that, maybe a Sith Lord was attending a spectacle and sensed that you were strong in the Force and took you to Korriban to train. A lot of you guys suggested things like the Cathar warrior, gladiator pits, or slave pits, because the Cathar are really well known for being a very strong race, a whole lot stronger than humans. I decided I wanted to try and stay away from that idea. It seems to be like a really strong, easy to pick background for your Cathar. So if you're making a Cathar, you're not sure what to do, and want to stick to something really lore appropriate, slave pits or gladiator pits would definitely be great. I want to stray away from the normal though. And I started with this random thoughts I had for myself that I actually posted in the comments just to get some feedback. It was a spur of the moment thing. Maybe they were a smuggler who was recently enslaved by the Sith after getting caught. I didn't have much more than that. They just were a smuggler, someone who worked on a ship, someone who wasn't a gladiator. I really like this comment by Wolf Alpha 900. Maybe give him a kind of unique sense of honor or personal code rather than the usual Sith kill everything style. The Sith are pretty well known for this, and I thought it'd be kinda neat. But I didn't know how he would get that unique sense of code. He's gonna earn it from somewhere, right? When you're thinking about the background for your character, if you're not quite sure what your actual character is about, maybe you can try going back and talking about their family first. Where did they come from? You're usually a product of your parents, and this is true in roleplaying making up character stories as well. A lot of my other characters actually have mothers, fathers, brothers, and sisters too, so why not this new character? It wasn't something I actually thought about until people started posting in the comments about their family. This one was posted by Casey. Maybe for a background, you are a son of a Cathar warrior who was defeated and enslaved during the Great Galactic War. Perfect, that's the right timeline. The Mandalorian Wars were 300 plus years ago. That's not going to work. You are raised a slave, but end up going to Korriban after it's discovered that you're force sensitive. Casey's comment made me start thinking about, well, that I have parents as a character, as a person, as a living being. Not quite a human being, a Cathar being. And I like the idea of my character's dad being a part of the Galactic War. The Galactic War is, from what I understand, you'll have to bear with me as I create stories and learn about the lore of this game. I am very bad for dates, barely past history, and we have a lot of trouble with the Old Republic era because we don't have strong dates to start with. We know vaguely when some things happen, but other things, there's like a 10-year span they could have happened in. Ask 10 different people when exactly the Star Wars The Old Republic game kicks in after the Treaty of Coruscant, and you'll get 10 different answers. But I think my dad dying fits in well in the timeline of being during the Great Galactic War. Does that make sense? Anyone really smart with the lore and read way too much can confirm that? As far as I understand, it's a maximum of about 10 to 15 years ago, but it could have been like he could have died before that or shortly after that, somewhere around there. I'm also not entirely sure how old my character would be, but I'm just going to leave it at somewhere between about 18 and 25 and not worry too much about it. Seems to be the easiest thing to do. And this is posted by Infinite NA, and a couple other people actually posted about this. Be a Cathar from Terrace. You see them in-game. And what's really cool is you actually see Cathar, like clumps, I guess. Probably a better word for that, settlements. Not tribes or clans, I don't think. That doesn't quite work. But you see them on Terrace. They've kind of resettled. Terrace used to be a thriving metropolis, and then it gets bombed by the evil Sith way back in the day, and now it's kind of a wasteland, but people are slowly returning to it. And there's Cathar there, and that's part of one of the storylines. So maybe I'm from there, maybe my dad's from there, maybe my mom's from there. I'm just kind of keeping that in mind right now. I didn't actually go with it, but I really like the idea of having some type of connection to Terrace. Maybe some of my ancestors actually went there when they were fleeing Cathar. I don't know. Now, when I was deciding whether I was going to play a male or a female character, apart from the actual aesthetics and the voice actors, which can contribute a lot to whether you like a character or not, I decided to play the male character mainly because I hadn't seen the male romance, which is with Ashara. She's a young Padawan, and I won't tell you too much about her in case you haven't met her yet. But Varigal Z commented and really made me decide I wanted to try it out. They said, my first character was a male Inquisitor, and Ashara romance is very interesting as she is a Jedi, and her insight is on point about the differences between the Sith and the Jedi. And that opinion made me love the character so much. So I'm definitely going to try that out. Other people have said she's really whiny. I guess we'll see when we get there. I definitely enjoyed having her as a companion as a female character. It was very cool to see the dynamic between them. Another cool comment about Ashara was by Alexander Asimov. And they said, my character starts off as a full dark side sadist, but later after he meets his Padawan, he becomes influenced by her and ends up in some type of in-between gray area. I really like this comment because in my playthrough with the female character, I felt like I was influencing her. I was the master, I was the powerful one, and she would have to kind of come around to my way of thinking. And she definitely did in the end. But in Asimov's idea, it's the other way around. You get more influenced by her, even though she's younger and she's kind of under your sway. But you really listen to what she has to say. And this is a comment that really got me thinking about what my character could actually be. So thank you so much, the almighty Ophical. Your comment was great. They kind of called me out. They said, slaves are sometimes people who work at the mines, people who work at shops like Anakin Skywalker when he was a child, people that are forced to build buildings, statues, and even starships. Servants of the Empire in every way. And they made a joke about the fact that I only mentioned hot, sexy dancing slaves. Obviously, there's a lot more slaves in the Empire than that, and I'm so glad you guys posted about what they could be. And then there was a great comment that was actually about slaves in the Empire. For slavery in the Empire, there's an actual codex entry in the game, and as you play the game, you discover the codexes. They're kind of written entries about all types of things in the game. There's planets, there's factions, there's just kind of any type of history about any object, person, place, group of people, pretty much everything. And they said that in that codex, there's two types of ways that a character could be sold into slavery. The first is that they're born into slavery and they're actually very loyal to the Empire. They kind of had a sort of Stockholm syndrome. And the second is that obviously they're sold into slavery in some way or another and they're very bitter and almost broken. They don't want to be there at all. And that was by Critches who posted that. And I really had to sit down and think, do I want a character that was born into slavery and kind of very loyal to the Empire, or someone who would fight at the yoke at any chance? And I decided I didn't want to be loyal to the Empire, but I think that would be really, really interesting to roleplay. But it'd be a lot harder to have confrontations. You'd just kind of go along with everything, I think. And on top of the comment about slaves being able to work so many different places, there was also this comment. Maybe give him some backstory that links into the story a little bit, such as saying he was part of the team that was working on the unfinished Colossus on Droman Kos, and possibly one of the leaders of the slave rebellion who was captured, but caught the attention of a Sith Lord who sent him to Korriban to study dark side. This would give you an emotional attachment to that part of the story. Maybe he even helped Scotia build a secret bunker and hates the Sith Lord because of this. Maybe Scotia knew that. Spoilers! Let's not read that next part because it's spoilers, but Joseph Henricher made a really cool point that it'd be really interesting to link your backstory with something you'd actually visit in-game. I thought that would be really neat when you're walking around doing your quest and all of a sudden you come across a place where you were formerly a slave. That would be really neat to think about when you're walking around. And this is from our Lord and Savior Nicolas Cage. Thank you, sir. He said... Just give me a second. Okay, I'm laughing because I say our Lord and Savior Nicolas Cage often comment on my channel, and his name always gives me the giggles. But he said a properly serious comment that I'm trying not to laugh so I can read. Many generations back, at the time of the Mandalorian Wars, your family lived on the planet of Cathar. Back then, they were known as seers and witches, as they displayed strong affinity to the dark side of the Force. When Castus Fett committed genocide on the Cathar, your family fled and became free traders, forsaking the Force-using ways of your ancestors as they were deemed impractical and dangerous. And I really like the idea of at some point way, way back, my ancestors were very, very Force-sensitive and very interested in pursuing the Force, and then all of a sudden they were like, nope, we're done with this, we're going to become farmers and traders and no more of this crazy nonsense. Maybe something horrible happened, but it still is carried down in the bloodline, and that's how it got to me instead of just out of nowhere. And this is one I didn't use, but I thought it was kind of neat to talk about. A lot of you guys commented in some way or another that you discover you're Force sensitive from a traumatic event. Maybe you fight the Sith Lord that was enslaving you. Maybe you're in the slave pits and you're about to die, and then Force power everywhere and you save yourself. And this is kind of how one of my other characters becomes Force sensitive. They're trapped by rat ghouls, and the only way they're going to save themselves is if something magical happens, and it does. And this seems to be a kind of common backstory for both Jedi and for Sith. But I thought this comment was neat because it found a kind of calmer way of discovering your connection to the Force. And this is by Eddie. Eddie said, "You are not allowed to talk to any of the other slaves or any of the Mandalorians that enslaved you. Actually, you are not allowed to talk to anyone. Once you were a bit older, you heard a Mandalorian talking about the Force. Because you were not allowed to talk to anyone, you started meditating. So in Eddie's version of the story, you actually find the Force through yourself, just quietly building up your connection to the life around you, only from a simple mention by a Mandalorian. Maybe he was saying, oh, I got zapped by that Sith lightning, I really felt it go through me, and you're like, what? You just start thinking about it until your thinking becomes reality." And this is another one that I didn't use, but I really like. It's about secretly infiltrating the Empire, and this is by Slow Music. And Slow Music, you might not know, but I commented to you that Chill, who is my good friend who's on Utini Cast, it's a Star Wars The Old Republic podcast, this is how he's playing one of his characters. You're not actually a bad guy, but sometimes you have to do bad things. This is what Slow Music had to say. How about you're secretly infiltrating the Sith? Since you're already a hero to the Cathar, you try to keep low and don't use all your force potential right at the start so you don't come off as suspicious. And that would be a really fun story to roleplay on almost any type of character. So if you're not sure how you can start your character story off, try starting with they're a spy or an agent or a plant and go from there. When Chill was playing, this made for some really interesting conversations and choices when you got to the cutscenes. In the cutscenes, you can sometimes choose to kill someone or to just let them live. And when it comes to the Sith cutscenes, letting someone live isn't always the best option. You might want to kill them so that they don't mess something up, or you might want to kill them as a show of power, and if you don't, you're weak. Chill sometimes chose to kill the person even though it was a morally bankrupt thing to do. But he didn't want to blow his cover quite yet. And here's a comment that really helped me cement what I wanted my character to be. And this is about where they would settle down and being free traders. Quite a few people post about being free traders, and I really like the idea. Not 100% clear about what I would do with it yet, but this is what Maslow had to say. So how about this? Your family lived a free life as traders throughout the galaxy. After a satisfying and successful career, they settled on Alderaan, where you are a young kid of about 8 or 9. When life was good and plentiful there, the infighting of the great houses continued to escalate until it finally reached your front door. And another thing that kind of I liked was the idea of being a slave to a high-profile Sith. And Piper of Farts, nice name, said, maybe your character's a slave to a high-profile Sith that sees your potential and takes you on as an apprentice before the Jedi killed your master. The only place you could finish your training would be Korriban. I'm also really bad at thinking of names. My main characters have names, but then all my side characters have names that are actually words. Like I have Eavesdrop, I have Shelter, I have Prosper, I have Disconnect. I have Sun. I'm very proud of snagging that up on a quiet server. And I have GTN Please. It's my very creative character name. So I was very happy when you guys suggested some really great names in the comments for this new character. And we had Mole TM say, I was thinking a name such as Javiik. And Mole, I really like that name. And we also had the Toxic Pleb. Great name as well for you, sir. But they said in parentheses, can his name be Vutta? And that sounds like Hutta. So I said, sure. Why not? So now that I've told you everything that everyone else has said, let's talk about what I decide my character would be. And I absolutely know for sure that if everyone had not commented, my character story would not be nearly as vibrant and complex as the one that I decided to choose. So I think I'm going to continue on with asking you guys either where I should go in the story or maybe just continue on the roleplay story. I'm not quite sure. I'm going to try and do it so that you guys can comment in even if you don't watch the whole gameplays, because I know many of you have played it 1,000 times over. And here we go. Here's my biography for my new Inquisitor Cathar. His name is Javiik Vutta. The Vutta family can trace their lineage all the way back to Cathar, where they were originally farmers and traders. Generations ago, members of the Vutta family were able to smuggle themselves away from the planet on a freighter full of refugees, one of the few families that were able to survive the attack by the Mandolorians and the genocide of Cathar. The Vutta family eventually landed on Alderaan and built a home for themselves as close allies of House Ald, once again returning to their roots as farmers and traders, but also creating strong neutral trade ties with the Sith-aligned houses, including House Thule, and even House Ulgo, even going so far as to serve as pages in their houses. This tradition carried on through the Vutta generations, until the Galactic War began to break out, where Javiik Vutta's young father decided to join the war effort and was shipped off to Dathomir, hoping to stop the genocide of a planet so close to their ancestors' home of Cathar. Not long after, the noble houses began to make declarations of violence of their own, leaving Javik's mother unsure of their safety on the planet. Not having heard from her husband and presuming him dead in the war, she quietly extracted her son, who was serving as a page under House Ulgo. and together they packed a majority of their trade goods into one of their cargo ships and left their Alderaanian homeland behind. Unfortunately, they were not able to escape the war, even in the vastness of space. Through a series of miscommunications and misunderstandings, they ventured into Imperial space and came under arrest and were reduced to slavery. Javiik's mother was sent to the shipyards of Balmora, and the young Javiik was sent to Dromund Kaas to work on the unfinished Colossus. When it was discovered he once served as a page in a noble house, he was transferred to serve under a Sith Lord, where his force powers were discovered, and was sent for training on Korriban. And this is where the story begins.